And in that effort, I am trying to bring he for she, the United Nations African Mothers Association, United Nations Women, the Links, the AKAs, all of the associations that I can think of together as African people, so that we can see each other, so that we can know each other. And a people united will never again be defeated. Unity is what we need. I want to go a little further and talk about the Abyssinian church. Abyssinian is named for Ethiopia. That's where the African Union has its headquarters. And I love the pledge as it was read in English, but I loved it more when it was read in Swahili. It had a little more flavor to it.
Yes.
But the Abyssinian Baptist Church, named for Ethiopia, represents a kind of historical connection to Africa in terms of who we are. One of the oldest churches among African people in America is the African Methodist Episcopal Church, called AME. And when you think about it, the first word is African. First African Baptist Church, the Abyssinian Meeting House up in Boston, and of course the Abyssinian Baptist Church. And legend has it that it was founded by Ethiopian sea merchants. Actually, that's legend. It was founded more by people who were formerly enslaved here in the United States, who decided that they had had enough of racial segregation in the house of God. And so rather than sit in a segregated area of the church, they decided to walk out and start their own church. And legend picks up and says that among them were some Ethiopian sea merchants, and so they decided to name the church the Abyssinian Baptist Church. In fact, in 2007, I led 165 African American people to Ethiopia. We were greeted by the president, afforded a state dinner for all 165 of us, and we met with Prime Minister Zanabi, and he sat with us for over an hour. We need to see each other. We need to talk. You can fit the United States of America, the continental United States, into Africa 3 times. It's a huge continent. And so what happens in the South might not necessarily happen in the Northeast or the Northwest of the continent. We have to talk, and we will find that there are more similarities than there are differences. Our experience began here in the wilderness of North America as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. Slavery is still an ugly mark on this nation and on Europe. Lies have been told that have yet fully to be refuted. And the damage is deep. And part of what African mothers are facing today is the damage that is a result of the exploitation of African people by Europeans. Walter Rodney's book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, is one of the best thought-provoking pieces of literature that I have picked up. And it came out in 1972. Do you think that that kind of analysis of what was happening to African people in the continent of Africa may have had made some contribution to the uprising in Soweto in '76? And as a Christian minister, let me point out that the African brother that I follow, they call him Jesus, said that anyone who does damage to a child ought to be treated by having a millstone hung around their neck and dropped into the middle of the sea. Now, for those of you who find that a bit radical, let me remind you that I didn't say it. Jesus did. And for the great Christians among us, I want you to realize that where children were involved, Jesus took no prisoners. He was very serious. And he indicated, as is a result of today's gathering, or as it has resulted in today's gathering, that a little child will lead us. So those young men and women who decided that they wanted an education that was relevant to who they are or who they were, they wanted an education that could reach them through their own language. Children led us and energized even more the ANC and other groups that were fighting to break the back of apartheid, racial discrimination, hatred, violence. And so, African mothers, you have a great heritage to build on. And it's a heritage that involves our children. And from everything I've ever read, if you want to retard the progress of a people or arrest it altogether, you attack the women and the children. And so we're here to learn more about each other, to bridge the gaps that divide us, to overcome tribalism, to recount and learn from each other our histories and our unique challenges. Because if we focus just on education, what's happening in Africa is really not much different than what's happening in the United States of America. And particularly here in the city of New York, which remains one of the most segregated school systems in the world. What's happening in Africa in terms of education is not much different than what's happening here in the United States of America, where the resources needed to truly educate our children so that they may come forth from the darkness, so that the veil of ignorance can be lifted from their heads. Mamie Thompson will know that that was Booker T. Washington down in Tuskegee. So that they would learn. Is not much difference than what goes on the continent, different than what goes on the continent of Africa. Because when you fail to educate the children and the women, you fail to educate the people. And so, sisters, we need you. If African women can say, listen, you all stop fighting or we're going to hold our affection, and turn a civil war toward peace, we can certainly solve this problem together. And that's why I invite you to come. That's why I'm here. It's a plea. It's a plea. And I haven't forgotten the brothers. The brothers are with us. I believe that we can get them if we can just bring the attention to our children. I am the president of a very fine public college here in the state of New York. And it's growing. We have an affiliation with the university in Kenya. We would want more affiliations across the African continent. We are the State University of New York. I'm the College of Old Westbury. We are the most diverse. In other words, we have the most black and brown students per capita of any other school in the state university system. I've been the president there for 20 years. And I'm retiring in January of 2020. But I will still maintain my relationship there because we've done so much building and so much outreach, particularly the black and brown people, that we don't want that to be taken away. And in so doing, we increase our demand for full freedom, justice, and equality in America. And our voice is lifted for that demand across the world. I am a Pan-Africanist. I believe in the unity of African people wherever we may be. That involves the Caribbean or the Caribbean. It involves South and Central America. And you have to know that many of the people that our current president wants to keep out of the country, who are coming up from the South and Central Americas, are people who look like us. One of the largest populations of African people in the world is in Brazil. And a tremendous repository of our culture, certainly in the Caribbean. And we must never forget the importance of our children in these places. So our concern is with African people everywhere. And I'm delighted to be able to share with you today. I was watching a video, and I hope that I'm pronouncing her name properly. Dr. Arikana Chimhombori Kwao. She, as that video represented, was the representative of the African Union to the United States. Here was an African woman articulating the struggles of African people from the Berlin Conference of 1884 to the present day. And in between that was the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. Both Berlin and Versailles represent the partitioning of Africa, the breakup of cultures, the destruction of people, and it's a strong word to use with mothers and children, but the rape of our continent, of its resources. We must talk to each other, because the same thing that's happening on the continent of Africa is happening with African people in America.